it was just a tough time for us. My mom worked as a nurse and they didn't pay very well back then. She didn't have a car to get to work, so she walked 3 miles every day, rain, shine, snow, whatever it was, she was there doing it. That hard work ethic and determination made an impression on me as a kid. And I know that it made me more determined. Things weren't going so well at home, though I took the opportunity to remove myself from that situation, and I came back to Del Rapids. I've always been really close with my grandparents. My grandmother was my best friend for a long time. It's a point in my life that I'll never regret, a decision that I'll never regret doing, because I get to spend so much valuable time that I normally wouldn't have been able to spend with them. I think we all hit rough patches in our lives, things that challenge us. And we can either let those times define us, or we can define ourselves by the way we respond to those challenges. Del Rapids has always been very supportive. People here have been great to me and really welcomed me in when I moved back. And I think that it's important that we give back to the communities that we live in. And one of the ways I saw that I could do that was by opening a small business. You know, at the time when I opened my business, there weren't a lot of new businesses opening in Dells. Most of the business owners were aging out and retiring. When people said it wouldn't work, I found a way to make my business last 20 years in my hometown. All my life I've been told that I couldn't do things or achieve certain goals. I think we all have. More often than not, I go out and do those things that other people say can't be done. It's because I was raised by determined parents in tough times. They never gave up, they never quit, and they didn't rely on some political party or policy to bail them out. Grit doesn't have a party, and at its core, grit is what binds us to South Dakotans. It's that hard work and your voice that I want to bring to Washington, D.C. I'm Dan Ahlers, and I'm running for United States Senate.
Education at the University of Sioux Falls. Dr. Nelson actually taught here for 20 years in Del Rapids. Randy is more than Dan's high school English teacher. He's a mentor and a friend. Randy was able to see Dan's potential. He was there to nurture those qualities and support him in what mattered most. With that, I would like to welcome Dr. Randy Nelson.
Good morning. It is good to be here today. This is the first time I've been in Del Rapids on a Monday morning for almost 20 years. And it feels very good to be back here among friends. I see a lot of familiar faces. I've already had a number of very good conversations with people, so it's great to be here, great to be back. I'm honored to be at this event to help Dan Ahlers launch his campaign for the U.S. Senate. I've known Dan for approximately 28 years, and over those years, I've seen numerous qualities in him that have always impressed me. Dan Ahlers has integrity, he has determination, and he has an authentic desire to be a voice for all people in this state. I first met Dan in 1991 when he came to Del Rapids as a 17-year-old young man to enroll in school. He'd actually been away from Del Rapids for 10 years and had lived for a year in Rapid City and then I believe 9 years in Gillette, Wyoming. And Dan's years away from Del Rapids had been difficult. In a lot of ways, things spiraled in directions he didn't necessarily like. Things didn't work well for him. School suffered, he faced a lot of hardships. And when he was 17 years old, he made the decision to return to Del Rapids to be with his grandmother and grandfather. His grandfather was suffering from Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, and Dan made the decision to come here and help his grandmother care for his grandfather. One of my vivid memories of Dan early on is that he was very humble as a student, certainly respectful, he was responsible, and I saw in him a growing attitude that helped him to believe that he could accomplish anything he set out to accomplish. I also remember vividly when Dan would accompany his grandmother to parent-teacher conferences, and his grandmother, I can still see them sitting across from my desk, and his grandmother had this unshakable faith in Dan, that he could do anything and he could be anything. And I think he is living proof that that is true. And Dan, I want to believe that if your grandmother and grandfather are looking down today, they are incredibly proud of where you are today as you run for the U.S. Senate. Dan gained confidence and decided to move his life forward. And very simply stated, he never looked back. Since Dan left Del Rapids High School, he enrolled at Augustana University, graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Government and International Affairs. He became an entrepreneur who ran successful businesses in Del Rapids for many years. He served twice as a state representative and once as a state senator. As a state senator, he was an advocate for improved education and health benefits for children, and he also sponsored legislation to benefit children with disabilities. Over the years, Dan and I have had numerous occasions over a cup of coffee or lunch. We've had numerous conversations. And in those conversations, I began to learn more and more and more about Dan Ahlers. And one thing that I saw that was absolutely spot on is he has a can-do spirit. There was a point when people told Dan, you'll never ever be able to go to college. He applied to one college, got accepted to that college, and graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree. People told him, you're too big. You'll never be able to run cross country. You'll never be able to run track. At Del Rapids High School, he was a cross country runner, and at Augustana College, he ran track. When he opened his video store here many years ago, people said, that store will never make it, it'll never survive. And he ran that business for 20 years. Dan also has a strong sense of integrity. He does what is right, not for personal gain, but because it is right. Hear what I'm saying? He does what is right simply because it is right. He has a very deep commitment to improving life for all South Dakotans. He has a very strong understanding of the critical role agriculture plays in South Dakota and how agriculture has to thrive for the rest of the state to thrive. Small towns and large towns alike in South Dakota are all dependent on the success of the farming community. Dan also understands that a solid education is the cornerstone in any society for progress. I believe without a doubt that Dan Ahlers is a man who very simply can see what's wrong, and he will work with determination to fix it. He can also see what's right, and he will work with determination to preserve it. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the next U.S. Senator from South Dakota, Mr. Dan Ahlers.
Thank you, everyone, for joining me today as I announce my candidacy for U.S. Senate. I want to thank my family for being here today. Without you guys, this doesn't get off the ground. I want to thank Mr. Nelson, Randy, for those kind words. You were there for me, you saw my potential, you nurtured it, and you never let me give up on myself. I have another teacher that's here today that was very important in getting to where I'm at and making this decision. My high school government teacher, Orrin Sorensen, is here. He helped inspire me and stoke the fire for public policy, for government, for believing that one person can make a change. And I am so thankful for the opportunity after he retired from teaching to be able to serve with him in the South Dakota State Legislature. Not everybody gets those types of honors, and I am very honored to be here with two of the most important educators and people in my life. Thank you. I'm thankful for the opportunity to serve District 25 in Pierre. I'll always cherish those memories. I will always be a Del Rapids boy first. You've heard my story. My childhood, I was faced with a lot of challenges. It was difficult to watch that video. I apologize for getting a little choked up. It's still there. It is part of what drives me, though. I remember going to school with worn out clothes, with clothes that didn't fit. I remember empty kitchen cupboards. I know what it's like to go to bed hungry. It's not a good feeling. Just a couple years ago, when I came back to the legislature, I remember an issue coming up in the schools with lunch shaming and what had happened to students who their bills hadn't been paid in a while, and how their lunches were being dumped into a trash can. And it brought back memories of my own childhood when we were facing tough times. We used to get different colored lunch tickets, and everybody knew that you didn't have anything, that you were poor. I was so embarrassed by it that I refused to use those tickets, and I would scrounge whatever I could out of the cupboards to put a lunch together. I used to walk along the railroad tracks and pick up pop cans so that I could take them to the recycling center, and it'd give me a little spending cash so I could have a few things. And I knew that it gave me a sense of independence and that that I mattered. But if that opportunity ever came that I could go back and not have those experiences, to not have been poor, to not know those struggles, I wouldn't go back. Because these experiences gave me the strength, the compassion, and the humility to understand the importance of the consequences of the decisions that I make as a leader in this community. To know that when I vote, when I make that decision on your behalf, that there is a connection between me and you, and that vote could have an impact on whether or not you have a job tomorrow, whether or not you have food on your table, and that matters. We're living in increasingly partisan times. If you're not on my side, you're on their side. Democrats blame Republicans. Republicans blame Democrats. Our elected officials are distracted by investigations, government shutdowns, and who's going to win the next election. I'm running because we need people in Washington that can get past that division, those distractions. South Dakota deserves a senator that will listen to you, work for you, and focus on what matters to you. And I want to be that person. In the past 3 years, we've had 3 government shutdowns. It's estimated that it's cost our economy $4 billion. Each time there's a threat of a shutdown, it causes our markets, our 401ks, our IRAs to suffer. Most Americans have less than $400 in their savings and cannot afford the instability created by Congress that cannot pass a budget. Our economy is suffering with a trade war. The costs are being paid for us, not China. This trade war is costing each American $460 a year so far. The tariffs that will have the greatest impact on us and our pocketbooks will take effect in December with an estimated cost to each family of $1,000. We have picked a fight not only with our largest trade partner, but with one of our largest holders of debt. China holds 27% of U.S. foreign debt. If China threatens to sell our debt, our interest rates rise, the value of our dollar would fall, and the economy would slow down. Don't get me wrong, I actually agree with the policy that we need better trade deals, that we need a fair shake for South Dakota workers, for American workers. But the approach that we go about getting this deal matters too. Almost every one of us have had a job in our lifetime that we've either hated our boss or that we just couldn't stand our job. And we always dream in the back of our head. It's always fun to think, I want to go up and tell my boss, take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more. They even made a song out of it. I mean, it's so popular. But that's not what we do. We have obligations. We have bills that we need to pay, families that we need to care for. The best approach to this would be to go out and find other trade partners. Just like we made one with Japan here recently, those deals should have been made ahead of time. We should have had a plan so that when we went to China and said, we want a better shake, that we were working from a place of strength. So that our farmers, so that our American families didn't have to suffer. And our farmers wouldn't be depending on government bailouts and handouts for survival. At home, this financial strain has lowered crop prices, compounded with poor weather and politics, has led to an increase in farm bankruptcies. Our economy is driven by agriculture. It was agriculture that saved South Dakota in the last recession. Without agriculture, South Dakota would have been in a hole so deep that we would still be digging ourselves out of it today. Even though our congressional delegation knows how important agriculture is to South Dakota's economy, they sit on trade agreements that would benefit agriculture. Passing the USMCA agreement would benefit our dairy and poultry producers. We can do better. Education in America is facing many challenges. Education is a very important thing for me. That's part of the reason that I volunteer and I substitute in the schools, because it is that important. And aside from being your legislator and representing you in peer and fighting for education, it was another way that I could give back and stay involved. And these last 3 years that I've spent working in your school, more and more is being asked of your teachers, but little is given in support with these mandates. In Washington, education is viewed as an expense rather than an investment. Think about that for a second. We always talk about the cost of education, but not what the investment of that education brings, not only to this country, but to our state, to our economy, to our future. We need to be listening to our educators to find best practices, not mandating one-size-fits-all approaches to education. We need to attract and retain our best and brightest teachers. I've watched many of my classmates that went into education move on to other careers or move out of state to find better paying jobs. This should not happen. This should not be something that our teachers should have to decide whether or not they can afford to teach children. Teachers earn nearly 20% less than their comparable professionals with similar education levels. Many of these teachers work second jobs and must complete additional training on their own time at their own expense. Our education system needs the ability to be adaptive and innovative in order to prepare our students for the evolving needs of our workforce. Our schools need the resources to support and offer more career experiences and opportunities for students. One of my passions in education has been working with students with disabilities. I spent a lot of my time in the school working with these students. It's a great feeling when you make that connection for the first time with that student. You know you've done a good thing. You know that you've made a friend. You know that you've had an impact on someone's life. I remember my first term in the legislature sitting in a committee hearing. I wish I could remember what that hearing was, but it's not important. It dealt with helping students and their families with disabilities. The hearing didn't go well that day. You know, if you wanted to say if we won or lost, that day we lost. Those children didn't get the services they were promised, the services they needed. And I was really down. And this little girl walked up to me, who's an adult now who has her own kid. It's great. You still maintain these relationships. But that little girl at the time walked up and she hugged me and she said, "It's all right, Representative Ahlers. You helped me. You gave me a voice. Even though we didn't win that day, even though they got nothing from it, at least I thought they got nothing from it, I gave them a voice, and that mattered. And it touched me in ways that I still get choked up. It's been 10 years. I still get choked up when I think about that. And I am thankful for those opportunities. Special education, however, presents financial challenges for many of our school districts. While IDEA aims to ensure that all children get a fair and equal education, programs cost significantly more. They're underfunded by the federal government. I spent a summer on a task force looking at the funding for special education in schools and trying to improve ways to get money to those schools faster. Those schools are putting that money out there ahead of time and waiting 16 to 18 months to see that money back. And what I found out is that after 40 years of IDEA, the federal government is only giving states 40% of the money that it promised them to run these special education programs. We can do better. If you send me to Washington, we will do better. As your state legislator, I helped develop a formula to improve reimbursement for the schools, for children with disabilities, and actually change the cost process of how we analyze those costs and how often they're reevaluated. I passed legislation that created an advisory council of parents and professionals that would improve the delivery of education to students who are deaf and hard of hearing. This League K legislation addresses the problem of students entering school, the 0 to 5 age group, ensuring that they have language skills. The majority of students, nearly 90% of these children, enter school without language skills. Can you imagine that being your child going to school, not being able to read, not being able to communicate, and being expected to succeed? I am so proud that South Dakota became the first Republican-controlled state government to pass this legislation. When I started this process, it was an all-Democrat bill, as it had been in many, many other states. Now, it could have been used as a campaign strategy. It could have been used as a pulpit to speak from. But when I bring legislation, I always expect it to pass. And to do that, I needed to work with my Republican colleagues across the aisle. And it was not easy. None of them wanted to sign on this bill. Some of them were even told to walk away from it. But by the end, we sat there with the governor, Republicans and Democrats alike, teachers and students and professionals, and we watched that bill get signed. And I can't wait to see what the next 10 years brings for this legislation, because I certainly hope that we can one day look back on this and say, we did something great. We ensured that every child, no matter whether they had a disability or not, shows up to school language ready. South Dakotans struggle with affordable health care. We spend more than $11,000 a year. Our costs increased last year 3 times the rate of the increase of our pay. This healthcare model is not sustainable. Instead of finding solutions, politicians chip away at the current system merely to prove that that Affordable Care Act doesn't work. Any system you deliberately sabotage will fail. While I agree that the Affordable Care Act was not perfect, wouldn't it be better to work to make the system and the healthcare system better for all? Healthcare providers struggle to balance the low reimbursement rates from insurance and government programs with the increasing number of patients on Medicaid and Medicare. As a rural state, we face tough challenges providing access to quality care, affordable care for all citizens. And there are no easy solutions. I have never seen an issue so complicated, so multifaceted, that you can't just sit there and say, this is the solution. That isn't how it works. We need serious people in Washington willing to work on this issue and make sure that every American has access to health care. And not just any health care, the best health care in the world. A single mother came into my store when I was in the legislature. She wanted to talk about her health care dilemma. She'd been working part-time. Her kids were receiving services from Medicaid. But she'd been offered a full-time position, a way to work herself out of where she was at. The problem is our current Medicaid system is all or nothing. And if she took that job, she would lose the health care for her children. She didn't make enough with that pay increase to pay the cost of health care. No parent should have to make the choice between bettering their economic situation and the health care of their children. We can do better. As your legislator, I supported efforts to realize Medicaid savings and support legislation that reinvested those Medicaid dollars to increase reimbursements to our critical need care providers. As your senator, I will introduce legislation that will give states more flexibility when applying for Medicaid waivers so that we can create a system that doesn't punish people but rewards those trying to better themselves. Today, our nation faces many challenges. We cannot afford to be divided among racial lines, religious, or party lines. Politicians in Washington are distracted by scandals, partisanship, and who controls Congress. Each day, South Dakotans suffer because of government inaction. We need representation in Washington that is willing to take on those challenges and work to find solutions. This election comes down to one simple question. Who do you want representing you? Do you want the career politician or the community advocate? Do you want someone who listens to their party or someone who listens to you? Do you want someone who fights with colleagues or someone who fights for you? Send me to Washington
and I will be your advocate. I will listen to your concerns, and I will work with my colleagues to find solutions to this country's most pressing challenges. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate the support. I want to take a moment to thank Papa's Pub for helping out with this event. They do a great job here in our community. I'm very thankful to have them here and that they would loan us this space for this event. Thank you again to all my family. You guys are always here to support me, even when you think I'm crazy. Even when I'm doing things that make you uncomfortable because I put you in the spotlight, you still are there to support me and there to cheer me on. Thank you again, Randy. Can't thank you enough. Warren, you guys, I wanted you here today because education is so important to me, and the impact that you guys had on my life meant so much. It doesn't happen without people like you, and I hope that we can shine a light on that and make sure that more people see that. Thanks again, everyone. I'm sure there's more food back there. Eat. I just paid for it, so eat.
Love you.
Thank you. Thank you.